I'm Jake Humphrey. You're listening to High Performance, the podcast that delves into the minds of some of the most successful athletes, visionaries, entrepreneurs and artists on the planet, and aims to unlock the very secrets to their success. And look, you can't do a job like this alone, thankfully. Damien Hughes, professor, an expert in the field of high-performing teams and cultures, is alongside me once again. Yet today, Professor, we're not talking about someone who excelled necessarily in a team. We're talking about someone whose probably biggest moment in their life came as individual glory.
Yeah. This person is fascinating. When I told my mum who we were meeting today, this was the most excited she's been of all our guests, because she really admires this person for both her strength and resilience, but also for her humility and just her quiet dignity. So I'm really looking forward to exploring a little bit more.
Let's do it then. Let's dive into a conversation about living a high-performance life with someone who suddenly is blushing. She conquered the world, from the British military to the British Olympic team. Today's guest, though, didn't stop at double Olympic glory. She went on to form foundations, to take part in TV shows, to write books, to become a dame, to return to the military roots, and so much more. So what has she learned along the way? And even if you can't run fast, how can her high-performance life inspire you? Welcome to the podcast, Dame Kelly Holmes.
Thank you.
Nice to see
look
you.
at that intro.
There you go. Where do we go from there?
I know, that's it, done.
It's Colonel Dame, isn't it?
Colonel now,
Colonel,
yes.
yeah.
Wow.
Colonel with the Royal Armoured Corps, which is really nice because you realise how... So I was in the military for 10 years and then I continued my athletics career and then obviously been out for a while, but you realise, I look back now and realise the values that I had from the army is still instilled through my other roles. So, about courage and discipline and respect and selfless commitment, all of those things are very much what I probably adhere to with everything I do. So it's quite nice.
Why did you feel the need to join the army at 18? What was the thinking behind that?
Well, I was not academic at all at school, at all. And so... being in a classroom, getting exam results didn't happen. And what happened was I had careers officers came, basically, and they showed us like the Army, Navy and the Air Force. And I wasn't inspired by the Air Force because of, it showed the administration side. I couldn't swim when I was 14, so ships at sea was not going to happen. And then I saw these soldiers and all they were doing is screaming and shouting at all the other soldiers, literally going underneath the scramble net and over the 12-foot wall. And I was like, oh my God. And it felt like a sense of, if I could get into the army, I proved I could be someone. And if I could get into the army, it'd be about discipline and hard work. And I felt like I needed that structure almost when I was a young person. So I tried to get in and I got in when I was 17 and 10 months old.
So was that structure something that you'd been lacking? Because having read about that your mum had you at a very young age and then you were in foster care at certain times during
care home,
your childhood. Yeah, sorry, in the care homes. Was it the structure that appealed to you then, or was it something other than that?
Yeah, I think it was definitely structure. I think I liked the intensity of what the army could bring, because it had the sporting element, but I didn't join for the sport. I did join to meet people, to be able to potentially travel, to actually have a career. Because I never heard the word university when I was a kid. I didn't have no idea about what I would do. And so my early days, actually, I did my work experience at a local leisure centre, then I did some work over at a local army barracks, and then I was a nursing assistant, which was completely random, but it was about helping people. And then I kind of just felt like that pull of army life would teach me about life and teach me to grow up quickly and to do something that nobody else had done in my area. All my friends stayed local, still doing the jobs that they were doing when they left school. I didn't want to stay local because I thought, well, what is there for me? I didn't have a clue what there was for me, because what jobs did you get when you didn't have any exam results? Where did you go? What was your future? And I didn't want to stay in a village, and that's it. I think so. It's maybe just more, it was in me to do and try something that no one else was doing to prove I could be good. I think it was more a mindset for that.
But your mum fascinated me. So when I was reading up about your background, and I think I said in the introduction that my mum has a really soft spot for you in terms of, because I think she saw the vulnerability of you, but that courage to keep persevering. But that's very much the description that when I read about your mum, she was somebody that had endured some quite difficult times, but was that constant for you. And I was interested in terms of what traits did you feel you inherited from her?
Yeah, I used to sort of look and try and see, I used to say, you my mother, I can't think, because we're like so different in one way. I was so sporty, driven, I didn't want to sit down. And she was just like, oh my God, relax, love. But I think I took from her, so she had me when she was 17, in the 70s, when it was very taboo to be with a mixed race guy who she'd had me with. I didn't know him. And when we went back to Kent, she was told by her dad, my granddad, that she couldn't look after me until she could look after herself, because she was 17, having a kid, bringing back whiter than white Kent. And so I then got put in the care home. But before that, we were in mum and baby units. She'd have her own flat. And then when the adoption services came, literally to take me away that day with her family, she had to sign the papers, but she refused to sign the papers. She said, no, I'm not going to sign the papers. I'm going to make sure I get her back. So what I know, is that fight, that kind of, no, if I want to do something, I'm going to do it. And that I know that I've kind of picked up with her, is that kind of resilience to, when you get against all odds, you can give up, or you can go, I'm not going to give up. Because her life would have been so different. My life would have been so different had she not given up. So I feel, I'm really pleased that I've had that part of her in there. Anything to do with sport or anything else, there was nothing. Right. There was nothing. But yeah, so I think we had a, very on and off relationship, because when you're a teenager, I grew up with my stepdad, Mick, since I was 5. And then she sort of left him at 17, so I more got close to him rather than her. And then I went into the army and we didn't speak. And then you start getting back because she's your mum, and I didn't know any other blood-related people until I met my sister and brother when I was 16 in a supermarket. But hey, that's another story.
Wow, what a story.
That's another story. So it's just those little, I suppose, elements of your background. So I think the key for me is I didn't feel I had a really good identity when I was younger. Yep. So I was in school, in both my primary school and my secondary school, the only mixed race person. I didn't have any sense of how I could connect educationally. I think if they'd actually looked into it like they do now, I probably was dyslexic. I couldn't read properly. Yep. I didn't write properly, all of those things. So I just had to go through life fighting to be good. And then, of course, sport, which we'll talk about, became my driver, my identity. But back then, I think I learned quite early on, and I don't know why, but I think I learned early on that when you're different, it doesn't mean you should then have that attitude that's a negative. I always thought, I'm different, I stand out, so I'm unique. Well, good. I don't want to be like everybody else. I want to stand out. So I had a different, in my head, when you're in the middle of a group of white kids and you're the only brown person and Boney M. Brown girl in the ring comes on, you can take that two ways, right? When you're stuffed in the middle, you can either take it like, they're picking on you, or you can go, yeah, tra la la la, and I was like, yeah, I'm the sugar and the plum, 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 and I had that attitude really young. And I'm really pleased that I did, because I don't know any different.
How useful has that been in the life that you've lived?
Always.
Yeah,
to have an identity that actually, if you're different, it doesn't matter.
Because there is research on this that's been done with sort of high performance, especially in the field of Olympians and sport, that from trauma creates triumph. Like those difficult experiences to give you some of the characteristics to then go on and perform at an elite level. How much would you identify with that, Kelly?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I suppose maybe sports people have it embedded in. People say, is it nurture or
nurture or
nature or nurture? I mean, probably an element of both. But I think somewhere you have to have it instilled with you to have that inner determination, that fight, and that kind of like, I'm going to go for it. But was there ever? Sorry to interrupt. But was there ever a moment where you decided you were going to take the fight option as opposed to being perceived as a victim? Just as a child, I just think that it's quite hard to comprehend, because when you're a young person, how do you have those skill sets to do that? But I just felt like all I knew back then was everybody that I see, as we do in the room now. Everyone was white in front of me, so I never thought anything because I can't see myself. So I just thought I was the same as everybody else. You know, there's only other people identifying that you're different. But skin colour doesn't mean that inside you, how you're born, how you're brought up, how you're educated, what you're told, what you're taught is different to that next person. I wasn't brought up in a Jamaican family or in a black environment. I don't know it. I have no connection. But it's hard to articulate that to people that don't understand it. Whereas in my youth, it was just like, they're all my mates, you know, we were just friends. You only get, when you're young, that's when people start putting the knife. But I didn't have that. So I think I was lucky that I didn't have that kind of, you know, hard-hitting bullying or anything when I was younger. So I think then I took that into secondary school where I just felt useless all the time. I was outside the classroom. I felt like I'm just a failure. No one give a shit because I was just like, you know, just the girl with no name until athletics took its hold, you know, and then suddenly I'm winning everything. You know, my PE's teacher's saying, like, if you're going to be good, if you want to be good, you've got to start focusing and believing you can be good because you're better than all of these at this. You might be outside the classroom and, you know, you've got to sort that out, but you're better than everybody here. And I was just like, oh my God, somebody's actually told me I can be good.
So was sport the first time in your life that you experienced success?
Yeah. In terms
At
of
what age?
the feeling. So within 6 months of starting running, I was All England school champion when I was 13. But then I won the mini youth Olympic Games when I was 17. So I actually won a gold medal in the 800 metres when I was 17 years old.
See, that is absolutely vital, isn't it? Because you've gone through between 13, 14, 15 years of being told you're different, being the only mixed race person in a white environment, being chucked out of classrooms, going into children's homes, wondering what your family history is, wondering whether you'll ever have a relationship with your family. And then suddenly, sport is the first moment where you go, wow, that is what it feels like, A, to be successful, but also to be celebrated by other people.
Yeah,
So
it was
when
amazing.
you look at it like that, no wonder that then determined your life. Because suddenly you related sport to feeling like you've never felt before.
Absolutely. I mean, when I won that first English Schools Championships, 1500 metres, I came back and there was all this bunting outside the house, you know, the old-fashioned bunting with I've got a picture of it somewhere, you know, like a piece of white paper with a handwritten welcome home, Kelly type of thing. And there's me and my stepdad outside with a big afro and then people are just like, you know, you get those little things, just like, wow. And then sport literally took up my life because we didn't have a bus to go to school, so I used to cycle to school, do whatever at school, cycle to training, do training, come back. That was my life as a teen. I didn't go out partying, didn't go out with mates. I went round the house maybe a couple of times. I loved it.
So where did that mindset then come from?
I loved winning. I loved winning. Watching the Olympic Games when I was 14, I watched Sebastian Coe with the 1500 metres. And
Was
I was
this the 84 or 88?
Yeah, 84.
Yeah.
I'm that old. 84, 84 Olympic Games, Sebastian Coe and the 1500 metres. I was already a 1500 metre runner by then. I literally got goosebumps inside me, like in my core. And I went back to school and I told my best friends, Kerry, Lara and Kim, I am going to be Olympic champion. And they said, yes, you probably are, because that's the only thing you're bloody good at. Which was true. But it was just that moment of, wow, I love the whole thing about the Olympics, you know, kind of the Olympic rings, what it meant, you know, the history of it, seeing success, people on a rostrum, national anthem playing, British flag flying, like medal around the neck. And I was like, oh my God, you know, I just felt it. It was just something like literally went through my body. And I knew that day that's what I wanted to be.
But you used a lovely phrase before, or quite a moving phrase, sorry, not a lovely one, where you said about, I was the girl with no name. And how much of it was just having someone know your name that was the appeal of that?
Yeah, all of it, just having like that you're here. You know, I always believe that one person can change somebody's life. Mum was my PE teacher, you know. We're still friends to this day. It's my PE teacher because it was her that actually said to me, Kelly, you can be good. And this is the part of why I just like my charity, but that moment was just having an identity is so important, you know, for anybody, knowing where they're going to go, what they're going to do, what they want to do, finding passion. I feel lucky that I had, the upbringing I had, lucky that I had those feelings inside me at a very young age, because 2 dreams were to be in the army as a physical training instructor and to be Olympic champion, and I've done both. Who else at 14 can actually say, I had these dreams, they were going to take forever, they were the fluffy cloud up there. It might have taken 20 years for one of them, and however many for the other one, but I did it. So actually, everything before that period of time was probably that little bit of grounding, fight for it. If you want it, don't give up. If you want to prove that you're good, you have to show you're good.
Yeah.
And I think those are those little bits that when you're a child, you don't think about. When you're an adult, you start thinking about all the little incidences that have happened along the way where you could have just given up, you could have cried, you could have said, I'm not good enough yourself, you could have listened to what people said. But I believe that to become the Olympic champion that I did was some of the traits from being young, thinking, no, I'm going to do this. You think I can't, I'm going to. But that was in sport. That's the only thing I knew I could do it in. I couldn't do it in anything else.
Because that is really intriguing. And there's a part, I want to jump forward a few years to, I remember reading that you produced your training diary on the 1st of January 2004, and there was a really moving passage where you wrote about, I've sacrificed so much to get to this, and I just want a year where I can get through it and without injury and setback to be able to go and achieve my destiny.
Yeah.
Was the phrase you used. How much did you ever go to the trouble of reflecting backwards and writing down all those obstacles you'd overcome to give you that sense of confidence?
As an athlete, I wrote my diaries every single year. Still have my ones from when I was 13. So I wrote diaries.
You were doing that at 13 as well, then?
Yeah, just writing, just notes about mainly training, like how I felt or if it was good or bad.
Because that's very smart to do that when you talk about the fact that really everything was a bit of a struggle apart from the sport. So how did you suddenly apply such a kind of smart scientific approach to your sport?
I loved it. Literally it was my life back then. So everything, I wanted to be Olympic champion. You can't just turn up and be an Olympic champion.
But who told you that though, that you can't just turn up and be Olympic champion?
Because I knew that to be able to get into Olympic Games, you'd have to break 2 minutes. I was running 250 something as a kid. It's like this isn't. Yeah. So I knew it was a long-term piece, but I suppose so that diary you referred to with the 2004, because that was on the back of a horrendous year.
Yeah.
When I wrote that passage in my diary, which I then put in my autobiography, it was really about everything that I felt. Like I just kept thinking I was cursed at this time. I thinking everything was knocking me back. So basically in 2003, for the listeners who don't know, during my career I was already 12 years as an international athlete. I'd left the army when I was 27. I'd been in there for 10 years. I had, just a massive breakdown, like literally to the point that I didn't want to be here anymore. And I was in a training camp getting ready for World Championships. I'd already been injured for many years, but won lots of medals. I was having highs and lows for all these years, fighting back. No one knew the story behind half of my medals. I'd be on the track and get a silver or a bronze, and people were like, "Oh, well, she got silver or bronze. It wasn't champion." And just like, you have no idea. I shouldn't have even been at this track.
Yep.
There's all those things that was happening. Anyway, in 2003, I got another niggle. I just thought, oh God, I thought I was cursed. I thought someone is there to try me. Somebody doesn't want me to achieve. So this period of time, I was getting ready for World Champs. I went into we were in a camp, and I went into the bathroom and basically broke down, crying inside, screaming inside. When you see somebody in pain, you see their heart breaking, but you can't shout it out because people are outside. Saw some scissors, starting to cut myself, became a self-harmer that day. Didn't know anything about self-harming, didn't know about depression, didn't know about breakdown, did not want to be there. I mean, how I didn't do something else was because I still had a dream. When half of you is, I try to articulate it on stage, when half of you is actually dying inside and half of you wants to be successful and driven, that's the hardest fight. It's not necessarily the fight of what you're doing, because at that time it's red mist, black dog, black hole, tunnel, whatever. But I had something inside me. I always believed I'd be Olympic champion. I don't know what it was. I always believed I'd be Olympic champion, even through the depths of despair, even through the injuries I had, ruptured calves, torn Achilles, stress fractures, glandular fever, all in my international career. I always woke up thinking, I'm going to be Olympic champion. And I don't know why that was. I always believe in fate. I mean,
Right.
there's a big thing in fate. I believe that I went through the journey, could have given up, didn't. Then I get 2 gold medals, so payback.
There's your reward.
But yeah, there's little things which make you, as a high performer, because we're all so different. I think something different in an individual sport has to be some resolve inside you that can go through a pain barrier, and that's whether that's physical or emotional, that kind of can push to that next limit, push to see how far you can get, push to know where you can take yourself. And I think I just kept pushing those little milestones. And obviously the breakdown was because I'd never really reflected on everything before. It's a different era back then. You didn't talk about mental health. When you went on a physio bed, they're treating the injury.
Did you feel it coming, the breakdown? Did you sense it was on its way?
No, because I just coped with the highs and lows for so long. It was almost like I was going through the same old routine. I'd get injured, fight through it, get back, get a medal, get injured, fight through it. It was just like normal. It was becoming like, for fuck's sakes, give me a break.
When you talk about going through a breakdown, for people that haven't suffered with mental health problems, is it you wake up in the morning and something happens and that's it? The breakdown has happened. Is it an instantaneous moment?
I think so. I think the actual breakdown part is.
Do you remember where you were
unexpected.
when it happened?
Yeah, I was in France. I was in our apartment, and I went into the toilet because I had another little niggle, and I just literally exploded. I mean, I can't explain anymore. Looked in the mirror and everything inside me was just like this explosion of hatred, emotion, disappointment. Like I felt like somebody was literally wanting me to fail, like literally saying you're not going to do this, and I just couldn't cope. But I think then that's the point: is you can have a bad day, you can have stress, you can have anxiety, you can have depression. We can have all of those emotions. We can just have a bad day. But the moment you have a breakdown, that's a different thing. I think there's a chemical imbalance that's just gone and broken, and I was broken.
But in hindsight, is there anything that you think any steps you could have taken to stop, before you reach that moment of breakdown?
Maybe in sport, people recognising that emotional roller coaster, because when you give your life to sport, there's no guarantees, is there? I had a secured job. I had a pay packet each month. I had status in the army. I was a sergeant by then. I knew my roles, my expectations. I was comfortable with that. And whilst I started my athletics career sort of halfway through my army career, even though my army career was first and foremost what it was, and I used to use my leave to go away and compete in the early days, when I left, I was putting all my eggs, let's say, in one basket to become Olympic champion. So what happens then is that every time you're doing something, you don't want negative around you. You don't want somebody saying you can't achieve, because I'm thinking I've got to get to the next games. You have Commonwealth Games, the European champs, a World Champs and Olympics within that 4-year cycle, right? Now it's 2 World Champs in that 4-year cycle. So every year, to prove that you're one of the best in the world, you've got to be at that championships and you've got to win a medal. So you can't just go, I'm not going to go this year. It's like, there's no, there's no not, and being paid as an athlete, you only ever get paid if you get a sponsor or if you compete. I was injured so many times on the circuit. I didn't get paid to run because I was injured so much. So I'm putting everything in. The medal was never about money for me, never about fame, never about anything. It was about purely proving to myself I can be good from back in the day.
Yep.
And knowing that by winning, then other opportunities come, because then obviously you might get the sponsorship, you might get whatever. I didn't really care about the money at that stage, but you are putting your life into a dream.
Yeah.
That's it.
So how helpful would you have been? There's a concept there's a psychologist called Gary Klein that talks about the idea of a pre-mortem. So before you set off on this cycle, 4 years, he talks about one of the most powerful things we can do is almost sit down and talk about all the things that could go wrong, that could stop you becoming an Olympic champion.
Yeah.
And if you do it before you engage in the cycle, when those dark moments happen, when the dips on the roller coaster occur, your ability to deal with it is so much more robust because you've anticipated it and you know how you're going to get through it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, probably.
But was that something you did? Or you talk about you couldn't allow negativity to come in?
No, because again, especially in the days that I was competing, so I had a club coach. When I was a youngster.
Yeah.
Then I left, went in the army, came back, asked him if he'd help me again. So he knew me as a 17-year-old. I come back to him as a 20-year-old adult who's a corporal at that time in the army, a bit of attitude and I could do this, what I mean? I was like, strong girl, strong woman. So he had to then battle with how do you go from being a club athlete to, I was already an international athlete by the time I came back to him. So, but that's all we had. I went to a masseur. You used to have a £25 token to go and see your local masseur.
Right.
If you could fit in. If you had a physio, then if they could fit you in through the British team, you'd then get a physio appointment. If not, you have to go to your local one or your doctor. So it didn't have that support mechanism.
No mental health support?
Oh, God, no. I mean, no, we didn't talk about mental health ever. There was nothing.
So did you mention your breakdown to anyone in British athletics?
So in 2000, no, I didn't mention anyone. I didn't know how to. How do you explain that you've just gone through something you don't know you've had?
What I find remarkable about this whole thing is, will you cut yourself?
No. I still put my sweet in my mouth.
Man.
Hurry up.
What I find remarkable about this whole thing is we talk often on this podcast about fault versus responsibility. You are the epitome of fault versus responsibility, because it wasn't your fault that you went into care homes. It wasn't your fault you didn't know your family. It wasn't your fault that you weren't right at school and you suffered with dyslexia. It wasn't your fault that you had a nervous breakdown. But through every single step of the way, you had to take on the responsibility. And I think it's such a strong message for people listening to this, that you can't live a life of blame and live a life of looking at fault, live a life of being a victim. You have, no matter how bad it gets. And you're talking about contemplating the ultimate act and self-harming. No matter how bad it gets, trying to find a mindset of responsibility is so important.
No, it really is. And I think if people listening get to those stages, I've always had this thing around how do you turn a negative into a positive, because I think there's always positives into anything that we do. So even at the brink of having a breakdown, if in one side of me is saying, but I haven't given up on my athletics yet. This is why I've got to that point. My dream is still to come. I was able to change that mindset through one bit, even though I'm emotionally still suffering, because you're a human being first and foremost. You have to remember that it doesn't matter what you've gone through in life. You have a breakdown, you're a human being first and foremost. However, as a sports person, having that ability to snap into where's those positives. And I think when I was at the depths of despair, I kept thinking, this is because I want it so much. I could give up. I could give up tomorrow. Why am I going through this? I want this so badly. Only I can do that now. So I can pick myself up. And I used to think to myself, especially back then, I looked back and go, so I've won, up until that point, I'd won 9 major medals, right? And 6 years of those had been having injuries, yet I've still come back with medals. I then go at the lowest of the low. I'm getting ready for World Championships and I win a silver medal at that World Championships. And I stood in rostrum with that around my neck. No one knew what was going on. No one knew what was happening each night, what I was going through. And that you take as a strength of character. So I think some people have to remember they've always had happiness somewhere in their life. They've always had things they know they can do. They've always had experiences that have been great and good. Yep. You'd hope most people have had those. So when you're at that depth of despair, there's a reason why you've got to that point. Yeah. There's always a reason why we have a breakdown. There's always a reason why people go to drugs, alcohol, self-harming in the way I did, cutting. There's a reason for it. So I knew at that time, my reason was I was hard on myself because I wanted to be good. That's throughout my whole life. Hard on myself because I believed that Olympic dream was going to come. And I didn't refuse to give up on it. Because I always, during that journey, I lived with if only. If only is too late. If you don't do something, you're the only person, no one else around you, the only person who lives with that, if only I did. And that's too late. And I never wanted that belly thing, that thing of thinking, God, I could have just carried on and then at least I'd known, And I think that's important. So when you say about this kind of responsibility stuff, and you mentioned about, Did anyone help you? In 2004, at the beginning, in January, I set up a mentoring programme called On Camp with Kelly. Yeah. And what this programme was to help junior athletes learn what it takes to become world class. But everything, not just the running around a track, because if you're running around a track, you're on my programme if you're good enough anyway. It was, can you go through hard times? Can you go for people putting you down? Can you go through the pressures of education with your mates going out partying and you've got the talent they haven't, but they're coercing you to go off to there? Can you cope with your age group, like they had a lot of anorexia problems because it became like a sort of, that's what everyone does. And I was like, I'm going to teach you everything it's taken me to get to where I've got. This is before I won my 2 gold medals. So I selected 8 girls, was going to take them to South Africa in the October. Can you imagine? They're going with an international athlete, middle distance runner to South Africa. Then I won 2 gold medals. And I came back and everyone said to me, there's no way you're going to take those 8 girls. I had all these jobs open to me. I could have done everything. And I went, do you know what? My biggest value of anything I've learned is to take these girls to South Africa. Now I've gone through highs, lows, success. And I took them to South Africa for a month. 15, 16, 17-year-olds. I had 2 sort of helpers. And in the end, that programme developed 65 international athletes. And these girls all stuck to their sports. They transitioned because it was about what does it take to achieve in your life what you want to achieve. It takes everything. It takes hard times. It takes tears. It takes resilience, hard work, commitment, dedication, people putting you down. It takes all of those, doesn't it, to be good?
Correct. Yeah.
So
no
here's
one
the
goes
question
through it
then,
easy.
Kelly. So if I was one of those young girls turning up on this camp, what would you give me as a proportionality of how much of your success was down to pure talent, your ability to run fast and things like that, and how much of it was down to all the other stuff, the ability to cope with those issues that you've just told me?
20% of talent, because there's so many talented people, and then 80% of going through everything else to get there.
Wow, okay.
If I go on a track at Olympic Games, 0.05 of a second separated the first 4 of us in that 800 metres. We're all bloody good runners.
Yeah.
Had I given up, I wouldn't have been part of that 4. So actually there's that inner bit, the belief and your ability to push and to, trust yourself and your own ability, I suppose, is huge. It's like you can win and lose a race just through your head switching off or going. There's so many times, I'd probably say in my whole career, only 4 times out of 12 years did I have that totally in the zone where I felt like I'm floating. 2 of those were the Olympics. And one was in breaking the British record in 97, 1,500 metres. And one was in Sydney when I was told there's no way I'm going to get there. I'd got a 12 centimetre tear in my calf in the January. I was told by everyone, like, you're 30, you're not going to get there. You might as well just carry on, wait for the next kind of season to come. And I'd already gone to the first Olympics when I was serving in the British Army in the Olympics in Atlanta. And I ended up getting a stress fracture. I still ran. I got into the heat semi-final. I came 4th. I got pipped on the line by a 10th of a second, running with a stress fracture. Right, had injections into the bone site to numb it. I was emotionally in pain, physically in pain. I said to myself, I'm not going to my next Olympics without coming back with a medal. Told I wasn't going to get there. Had 6 weeks of running only that year. Everything else was a pool, a stepper, cross trainer, bike, everything, weights, training. My head was like, I'm going to do this. I got there and I got a bronze medal. I was actually leading with 30 metres to go. Those Olympic Games, I was leading, and at one bit I got scared. I was like, oh my God, I'm right here. And then suddenly, one girl comes past me, and I didn't fight because I was just thinking, what's happening, And then the next girl come past, the next thing, luckily the line turned up.
See, but then in 2004, but because in 2004, it's fascinating hearing you describe that Sydney Games, because I remember that. But those 2 events where you won the gold in Athens, like, the way I remember it is there was a real sense of calmness about you during the race, because I remember you, like, tactically, you let others go off and you just sat and you held your ground, and then you came and had a strong finish. When did you learn that emotional control that was obviously lacking in Sydney, to panic at that moment, to then 4 years later come and be so serene?
I had a totally different mindset going in 2004 because what had happened to me in 2003, like, totally. I just knew that the only thing that was letting me down was my body and health. So, because I'd gone to even all these other things. So I'd said to, instead of telling the people around me the emotional side of what was happening, I told my physio, I need you to be the best physio you can be. I want to be the best in the world. You're already a good physio, but you need to be great. Like, almost like it was selfish. I said, you need to live my life. You know, I need to be stalking you. That's literally what I did. Training partner, who was a guy who gave up his athletics career that year, Anthony Whiteman, who was a 1500 metre runner for Great Britain. He was lacking in motivation, kind of wanted a bit of a kick up the arse, and I said, like, would you come and train with me? And then prior to Athens, we were in holding camp in Cyprus, and because he was a man, he was faster, I could just run, I knew the times, and he did. And quickly the story goes on that after Athens, he then broke the world record for the men's and men's over 40s 1500 metres and become world record holder for the mile. You know,
so you raised the bar for him.
Raised the bar for him. Yeah. So what I did in 2004, because I knew I didn't feel at that time I could get any lower than I'd been, and because I was still there, that made me even more thinking, I can do this, you know, because I can't go any lower, yet I'm still achieving, you know. So I changed my mindset, hence why I wrote that book, that bit in my book, and in the diary. And then, so what happened is I decided that I needed my legs to do the talking, because when you go in sport and you're recognised, you end up getting, especially in your own sport, people want to know how's it going, papers all after you, it comes to Olympic year, they try to put people up on a pedestal. Yeah. And I just thought, I don't want that. Do you know what? The only thing that's going to actually make me feel good is me being good. So I ended up not doing any media that year until right before the Olympic Games. Paula Radcliffe was put on the pedestal. You know, everyone was she was going to be our golden girl, which actually helped everybody else because no one was interested in us. You know what I mean? Anyway, so then what happened is the change around was that I had a different attitude to high performance. Like, I knew I could do this. You know, when you've won that many medals with that many setbacks, it's like, for me, fate and staying injury free. So anyway, what happened is I went to World Championships, fell in the indoors, and I thought, you know, like banging down the thing, and I thought, that's all right. It's just a blip. And I changed my attitude to feeling like everything's against me to feeling, pick yourself back up. You're not injured.
You took
go
responsibility.
again. I took responsibility. I took responsibility of my team. I said, this is what I expect from you. This is what I know I want to do and what I can do. And then we got to holding camp. Training was like literally going off the roof. But I'd lost every single 1500 metre run that year, and I'd won every single 800. And that was a psychological thing. I was wanting 1500 metres so bad, I run pants. 800, I didn't think I was going to take part. It's like running how I should. And that's how your brain, you know, if you're good at anything, 1 minute we can do it, the next minute it's like, we feel like we're useless at something because we haven't clicked that brain in the switch up. So anyway, I get to the Olympic Games, training had gone brilliant, hadn't been injured for the rest of the year. I was eating better, sleeping better, happy, relaxed, and I could run. And then when we got to the 800 metres, because I only decided that I was going to do both like 2 days before I went into Athens, because I thought, well, what have I got to lose? If I'll come back with two medals of any colour, or a great end to a season, I had a completely different approach. It wasn't all, I've got to. I almost took that off of me a bit, the pressure, and said, run how you run.
So that's a question that I wanted to ask you when you were talking about that, so being in that bathroom in France. Do you feel you could have achieved more if you'd have started to be kinder to yourself much earlier?
I could have, I could have not been funny or saying it, you know, this side of it, but I could have won those Olympics in my first Olympic Games when I come forward for stretcher. I could have won in Sydney, but I was always under pressure almost because of like the injuries, and then putting myself through that, got to get back. I never reflected, you know, you don't reflect. When you're on a physio bed, it's all about get that injury sorted. No one really sort of took you on board and said, okay, so you're going through an injury. This is going to impact your anxiety. This is going to impact the stress that you're feeling. You're going to be worried. You're going to this. You're going to be that. It's not just about the injury. Never had those conversations.
That was an era, though, where it was all about be brilliant, push yourself, be the best, don't be weak. No one in that era was kind to themselves.
No.
That was seen as a weakness, I think, in that era, wasn't it? And I think now we're much more open to, if you're good to yourself mentally, that's not a weakness anymore.
Well, in 2003, no one talked about it. When I wrote my autobiography, nobody was talking about it. In 2005, I hadn't even told my mum, friends, family. No one even knew about what was going on in my life up until I wrote my book the year after I retired. Not one person.
Your phone goes
hadn't
off the
told
hook
anyone.
then when the book comes out, I imagine.
Then it goes mental, but then, you know, how many people remember me on the front pages of the national newspaper saying I'd sold harm? Hardly anyone, because it was just like fish and chip paper. She said something, next day it's gone. And it was only sort of 2017 when I was on a TV show that were talking about it again, and everyone's going, oh my God, really? And I said, yeah, I've been talking about it since 2005. You're now listening. And sport has now changed. Sport has also changed at a high level. Instead of just having just having a sports psychology focus where it's about, can I get to that track without feeling nervous, sick, can't get there properly, and I need somebody to guide me through it. They now know that they need to talk, as you said, that beforehand about the process of how you're going to, get through that journey.
Can I just jump in with one quick question, Kelly?
Sorry, yes.
I'm conscious of your time.
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line in terms of, you share a lot of this around your mental health, and I think it's a real testament to you because there's a real vulnerability in what you're sharing, but I think it's really helpful. But then I've been interested that you draw the line at some things where you just won't discuss it, and that's not for debate. And I'm just interested in terms of where you choose to draw the line in terms of what you share versus what you keep private, and what advice would you give to some of those young athletes that were listening?
Yeah, well, for anybody really. I mean, we live our own lives, and it's only us that we are living our life for, essentially. You know, we might have family and friends and people around us, but essentially it's our life, right? We've all got this inner ability to want to be good at something or to drive. And I feel like when I share anything to do with the journey of athletics and the emotion and the breakdown and that's a human trait that lots of people will come across, barriers and setbacks. Like when I talked about bereavement with my mum, no one talks about these things, but why? You're not happy just because they're now, had the funeral. It's still freaking in you. Like I breathed for 18 months, I was in a right state. I believe that there's things that will help people by me sharing those things. There's other things, what I don't choose not to say, that's not going to help. Well, it's nothing to do with you. So it's not going to, if it's not really impacting you, maybe things would, but I've chosen that most people know me because I won 2 gold medals, right? They don't know me for any other reason, really, apart from what now they're getting to know. But essentially, most people know me because I won 2 gold medals. So I believe, how do I inspire people, not just athletes, anybody, to get the best out of themselves, to be the best version of themselves, to work hard, to be motivated, to take responsibility, to look at yourself, be respectful, have values. If I can pass those, that's going to help a lot of other people with their mindset on expectation that they should get something back for it, or actually it should be given to you easy, or it's an easy road to get to success. No, it's freaking not. So I share my life and my journey and what happened to me during those heights of my season, because most people have no idea that I went through that. Yet I then go, even if you've had the worst time of your life, ups, downs, barriers, whatever they perceive to be in your life, and remember, never, never, ever compare yourself to someone else's life, because what I've had happen to me might not ever be as bad as somebody else, but I'm not living their life, I'm living mine. So what I've had happen to me was hell for me. And I always believe if I can articulate that in a way that's motivating, that people can look at their life and go, okay, this might be happening or happen, but I can actually do something else with it, or I can take the positives out of the negatives, see other people still being successful even though they've had bad time. That has to be something that motivates others. So I've chosen that is the line that I go, all about me and my drive and the emotional side of it that I think will impact a larger people in society.
I love the clarity of where you choose to draw the line though. I think it's really powerful in this day and age that there's some things you'll discuss and some you won't, and that's for you, and you defend that. And
people have a decision to do it when they want. And as I've got older, I never used to speak about anything close to me, like nothing ever. I was a closed book, like literally, I've always been a closed book. And now I'm a bit more me. I show my personality more on TV. I look how I want to look now. I don't conform. You come back from the Olympic Games. and everyone's going to these events, you know, women got long hair, they're all in their dresses, and I still wear dresses if I want to dress up or whatever, but I felt like I didn't really, again, know my identity. My mum passed away. The day she passed away, I had this hair shaved off, my undercut, because I'd been speaking about it for ages, and I thought, shall I, shan't I? What will people think? What will people say? What will people think I look like? And I thought, I don't care. Because actually I've still got my values, I'm still respectful, I still am me as a person, but I want to be who I actually want to be. So I'll show it in this way, but I don't have to then speak about every single part of my life.
Brilliant.
There's a book by a man called Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, and in it he talks about the fact that being completely you, 100% honest in everything you say and everything you do, not putting on a front in any respect, is almost like a superpower. And once you're brave enough to go, this is me, if you don't like it, fine, but this is me and that's all I can be, it's a really liberating place to get to, I think, and I'm so pleased that you feel that you're there. And
well, I feel that I'm there, you know, there's still things
great.
that I wouldn't choose to discuss, but that's just because you just, why, you know, at what point?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you might get to a part in your life at a certain situation. It's like when I started to speak about this, it was a point in my life it was right. Other things that I've come through, there's a point in my life that it's right. The bereavement, I had to go through that to now talk about bereavement. I didn't when my granddads and my nans died because it didn't have that same thing. There'd be a point in my life somewhere else that something else will come out because I think it's right. But at the moment, you don't have to shout. Anyone can do what they want in life. If you want to shout about something, shout. Freedom of speech, who you want to be. If you don't. You don't have to open yourself, like, you know, people can, I always think in life, people can look at someone, assume, have assumptions, they can do whatever, doesn't it? But you don't have to, you know, anyone can make an assumption, fine.
Let
Who cares? Let it be, yeah, just do what you want, be you.
And finally, having waited so long, did it feel how you hoped it would feel when you crossed the line and won the gold?
Oh my gosh, yeah, even more than that. You know, huge weight came off I felt on the 1,500 metres, this ton weight literally fly up off my shoulders as I was going around, literally felt the thing. And I sat in the press conference, it was just before the 4x1 men won the gold medal for Great Britain, and I said there, I can now be me. That's literally my words.
So powerful. Listen, we always finish with some real quick-fire questions.
Oh, God.
Three,
I don't like these, I can never think.
3 non-negotiable behaviours that you and the people around you must buy into.
Oh, shit. Be nice, be kind.
Yeah.
Oh, not do or should do. Sorry.
Should do.
You think you have to be so kind.
Yeah. Don't judge somebody.
Yeah.
Like a
Non-judgmental.
Before you know them, and be respectful.
What advice would you give a teenage Kelly just starting out?
Actually, if I was writing the book to her, I would tell her that you're going to go through shit, hell, life, but don't give up, because it's still, you know, whatever you go through is going to be the making of you. I always used to say, and this is not fit for, I used to think that the Olympic Games was my destiny. I do not believe that now. I believe it's my journey. And my destiny is to talk authentically to people about that period and all the things I've gone through to help somebody else.
How important is legacy?
Legacy is important when it's talked about in the right way at the right time. Legacy is only through history and proof and things working, not just because of, you know, something happens. For example, 2012, you know, everyone said legacy. Well, legacy is only now getting proven because somebody might have run there in 2012 or been inspired by 2012, and then you can say there's a legacy.
And what's your one golden rule for our listeners that want to live a high-performance life?
Believe in yourself.
That is the perfect way to end. Listen, if you got more, if you got more.
No.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Being so honest and sharing a story that I know a lot of people still won't be fully across and they won't fully understand. And then hearing you sit here and talk about it in such an honest way, I think it is without doubt going to do exactly what you want, which is to help people. And when you talk about, as an athlete, 80% is in your head and 20% is in your body, I think that is something that isn't just about athletics, that is about life. And it's a great message.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Kelly.
Okay. Thank you.